Hey everyone, welcome. Hope you're doing well. This is the first lesson that we're going to be doing, sorry, in chapter 7. However, it won't be, the first like geometry lesson. This is actually more of like algebra review stuff. But this is all stuff that you're going to need to know how to do in order to do the geometry stuff later. So this is all radical stuff, right? This unit is about right triangles, and radicals come up in right triangles. So the first thing that comes with radicals are the perfect squares. Now, I know at this point you know at least what the perfect squares are, or you'll be able to remember them. So here are the perfect squares. I'm just going to list them out. 144. Okay. So there's the first 15 perfect squares. And the reason you want the perfect squares is because when you are simplifying a radical, remember you want to break up your number into into two factors, and one of them has to be a perfect square, okay? So that's why I picked 4 and 5, because 4 is a perfect square, all right? 2 is not a perfect square, or 10 is not a perfect square, so we can do 2 times 10. So we break it up into 4 and 5, and then because 4 is a perfect square, we can take the square root of 4, which is 2, and then we have 2 radical 5. And so that would be the simplified version of what we just did, okay? So that is basically, what you're doing. You're looking for, okay, what numbers are going to multiply to make 27 where one of them's a perfect square? Okay, well, I'm going to pick 9 times 3. 9 is a perfect square, so then the square root of 9 is 3, and then we have 3 radical 3. All right, so whatever number is that perfect square, then you take the square root of that number. So here, all right, we have to pick one with a perfect square. I'm picking radical 4 times radical 10. 4, the square root of 4 is 2, so our answer is 2 radical 10. All right, so that's how you simplify radicals. So you can go ahead and try these two, all right, give it a shot. I'm going to move on to multiplying with radicals, all right? And multiplying with radicals is pretty easy. What you do is you just multiply like normal, okay? So the square root of 6 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 30. All right, and that's actually it. That's your final answer. So, I mean, you can try and simplify it. 30 can't be simplified though, so this one you're done. If you have numbers outside the radical, then what you do is you multiply the numbers outside the radical. So 2 times 3 would give us 6. And then you multiply the numbers inside the radical. 5 times 10 is 50. So we get 6 radical 50. All right, so you got to keep them separate with the numbers inside and numbers outside. Now 50 can be simplified, okay? 50 can be simplified into 25 times 2. And 25 is a perfect square. So if you have a number out in front and you're simplifying, you just leave that number out in front. And then when you take the square root, then you have now 2 numbers out in front. So you can multiply those together. 6 times 5 is 30. So this becomes 30 radical 2. On this example, we have the same thing. So 4 times 2, that's 8. 9 times 4, that's 36. And the interesting thing here is that we have 36, and 36, if you recognize it, is actually a perfect square. So if your number inside your square root is actually a perfect square, you don't have to go through all the steps of breaking it up and simplifying it, okay? All you have to do is take the square root of it, all right? The square root of 36 is 6. So then 8 times 6 is 48, and that would be your answer. So hopefully that makes sense. So once again, you go ahead and you try these two on your own. You pause the video and see how you do. The last one that we're going to talk about is now dividing with radicals. Okay, so dividing with radicals, you don't want to have an answer that has a radical in the denominator of a fraction. Okay, it's just not considered good. So what you have to do is you have to do this thing called rationalizing the denominator. And in order to rationalize the denominator, you have to multiply by whatever radical is in the bottom over itself, all right? So we want to multiply by the square root of 2 over the square root of 2. And the reason we want to do that is because 1, right, anything divided by itself is 1. So we're not changing the value of our original number. And 2, by multiplying the same number by each other, we're guaranteeing that this number right here now is a perfect square, okay? And because that number is a perfect square, we can take the square root of it. Square root of 4 is 2. And so now this is actually the more simplified correct version, all right? 3 square root of 2 over 2. So that's basically just what you're trying to do. You're moving the denominator into the top, okay? So we can do an example. All right, here, same thing. The denominator has a radical of 5, so we want to multiply it by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. This gives us 6 radical 5 over radical 25. And again, square root of 25 is 5. So now we got rid of that denominator in the bottom. Now, maybe you're noticing a pattern here, right? This is the square root of 2. This ends up being 2. This is the square root of 5. This ends up being 5. And that actually is going to happen, all right? Whenever you have the square root of a number times the square root of a number, it always equals that number, right? Because the square root of x times the square root of x is the square root of x squared, and the square root of x squared is x. So the two basically combine and become 1. So you don't necessarily have to write this middle step every time. You could go right to this step right here. So last one, all right, it can look a bit more complicated. That's fine. We want to ignore the radical on top, and we still just want to multiply by radical 6 over radical 6 because we don't want or care about changing the radical on top into a whole number just on bottom. So we have to know how to multiply. So on top, we're going to have 2 radical 18. On the bottom, radical 6 times radical 6, because we just talked about that's 6. Now, radical 18 can actually be simplified, okay? And this is something that you need to start getting good at being able to recognize and do on your own. Radical 18 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. Square root of 9 is 3, so that's 3 radical 2. So this right here, we're going to substitute in for radical 18. So this is going to become 2 times 3 radical 2 over 6. Okay, now we can multiply those numbers on top. 2 times 3 is 6. We have 6 radical 2 over 6. And as hopefully you guys know, 6 divided by 6 is 1, so those cancel out. And so we just get radical 2. So your final answer here is just simply radical 2 after all that stuff. So simplifying is important. Knowing how to do it, it can make your answers better, okay? So once again, you guys go ahead and try these two on your own. But that's it for today, all right? If you know all of these things, you know how to do them, then you'll be ready for this unit. If you have any questions, let me know, and have a great day.